Please stick around for the end of the presentation to learn how to make your voice be heard on the subject. I'm thrilled to introduce the 4 student leaders with us today, and starting off with Leah.
Hi, I am Leah Fremming, and I live on Mwekama Ohlone land. And my greatest hope for the environment is that we can reach a point of sustainability. And I also hope that we can kind of allow our ecosystems to recover from the damage that we've inflicted. And then next, I'm going to introduce Taylor.
Hello, I am Taylor. I live on Sealitz and Cowlitz land, and then my greatest hope for the environment is for healthy stability within it for things such as salmon and other things. And then Kaya.
Hi, I'm Kaya. I'm calling in from Spokane tribal land, and my greatest hope for the planet is that we will be able to move forward in the future in a mutually beneficial relationship with the environment. I'd also love to introduce our first guest speaker today, Jay Julius of the Lummi Nation. Jay is a 7th generation fisherman and is an outspoken community leader for speaking on issues relating to salmon and the orca. Jay, thank you so much for being here today.
Kaya, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I just want to make a correction. I think I'm like 150th generation fisherman from here, but that's okay. No, but in all seriousness, it's an honor to be here. And thank you. Thank you for coordinating this and putting this together. I think this is our hope. This is our hope for the Southern residents. This is our hope for myself as a salmon people, very seriously, probably 150, whatever, however many generations, that's who we are. We are the salmon people. And like the orca, we cease to exist without salmon. It's, my name is Jay Julius. I am a fisherman. I am a father. I'm former chairman and council member of Lummi Nation. I'm founder of a nonprofit organization called Cecila, which in our language means our grandmother, and also co-founder of the Northwest Tribal Salmon Alliance. And really for me, since I've retired from a elected leadership position, that has been the focus is orcas, salmon, and my existence and my son's existence as a salmon people. And I know that's hard to see.
I'm listening to a salmon, orca, today's Orca Recovery Day.
Oh.
And
I'm interrupting you.
And really that's primarily what my work is focused on. My son is co-executive director. He's 21. And I love the fact that he is doing this work like you are doing today. And I think this is the hope. The hope is in the youth. The youth's common sense hasn't been eroded by the busyness of our way of life, what has become our way of life. And really that's valuable and important work that we need to do today, not only for your generation, but your generation, future generations to come. So the orca work started for me. I don't know if any of you know who I am or my story, but really quick, I was placed on a boat at the age of 2 with my father. And what was awesome about that, my father died when I was 7, but the memories created with him on the water and that oneness, being one out there with the orca, with the salmon, with the water, with my ancestors, because really that's what it does for me still today, is connects me to my father. And that's where I'm one with my father. But one of the cool things that was normal for me is summer was always my favorite, because I got to return to the salmon banks. I got to return to the water. And one of the cool things was orcas swimming next to me was a normal thing. And orcas coming up and saying hello was a normal thing in my summertime. And this happened a few months ago, well, 2 months ago with my daughter. My daughter, we left Bellingham Bay, and she said, "Dad, have you seen the orcas lately?" And I said, "You know what? I haven't. And she goes, "Well, that's my animal spirit. And I think we'll see him today." So we travel and we get about an hour out towards San Juan Island was our destination. And sure enough, at Lopez Island, we stopped and we saw that the orcas were feeding and the whale watchers were out there. So we stopped and we were way far away. And we just sat there, shut off the boat, and she was, you know, she was excited. And what was awesome was the orcas being about, I don't know, 700, 800 yards away. They were really a long way away, far from us. But what was awesome is I shut off the boat, stood on the back deck, just watched, couldn't really see them, but we could see the activity. But then they beelined it for us. And it was so cool. And this isn't the first time it's happened, obviously. It happened in childhood, but this particular moment this summer, they beelined it for us. And there was 5 of them, and they came up right next to the boat and then kind of went underwater, and they turned on their side, and one looked at me, and my daughter's filming it. And she's like, oh my gosh, on camera. She's, oh my gosh. And then she turns it over to under her, and this other one is turned on its side as it goes under her boat and looks up at her and says hello. But where I'm going with this is that, and I know I only have a few minutes, that has been my life. And that is our life. And that is our norm. These orcas are descendants of generations and generations and hundreds of generations who have known my family, who have fished as one, who have lived as one, who have respected and never disconnected or divorced ourselves or themselves from being one with nature. And I think as we look at the climate crisis, as we look at the Southern residents, one of the most important things I think I could leave with you is, if no one else has invited you, if you haven't invited yourself, or if for some reason you don't feel like we're worthy, I invite you back to be in one with. There is not a separation. We are one with. We are the orcas. We are the salmon people. We are the salmon. You are indigenous from somewhere. And being indigenous for me is maintaining that connection and never allowing that separation to take place, because what happens to what we now see and call nature inevitably happens to us. It's actually happening to us. And while we have things to kind of cloud that reality, it is our reality, and it is especially our future generations, because Kaya and Leah and Rachel and all of you on this call, I'm 46 years old. And in my short time on this earth, I have seen drastic change, drastic. And my great-grandmother was born in 1888 and my great-grandfather in 1892. And they both died when I was 5 years old. And what's amazing about that is they spent 5 years of my life with me. And that put me one hug away from pre-contact. That put me one hug away from full-blown one with nature, one with fishing side by side. When there was a saying that we arrived in this land and there was nothing, it's completely false. We had everything. The orca had everything. The rivers had everything. Everything was alive. We had everything we needed for nothing. Now we're getting close to having nothing. And for us, that is existence, that is connection, that is being one with, that is, I don't think happiness is found in a second home. Happiness isn't found in a car. Happiness isn't found in things. Happiness was found when there was a perception that we had nothing at the arrival, and we had everything, and we lived a long time. We must, I met with Deb Holland in DC last month and was fortunate to have a private meeting with the first Native American at the Department of Interior. And she's amazing. She's amazing. And one thing she said is we need to work on indigenizing the worldview, because we do have different worldviews, and we still walk on that wild side and still believe that we are one with, that we are connected to, we are not separate from. Nature is not something separate that we go visit on our days off. It's something that we are with and one with every day. And the challenges in that, how do we create policy? How do we, Leah, Taylor, how do we constitutionalize the rights of nature? How do we constitutionalize the rights of the orca? How do we constitutionalize the rights of the river, the rights of the salmon? That's something we need to do together. That's something we need to think about, because we think different, being from two different worldviews. Politicians over here think this way, and some of us who are suffering from climate anxiety and anxiety from the realities that we live with today, we have to figure out how are we going to communicate with each other to constitutionalize things like this, to give them the rights. They were here first. We can't live without them. I want to leave you guys with just a few things to think about, maybe something like that. Or, and for me, my grandfather shared with me, he died in 2010, my grandma died in 2011. They just made sure I knew that the passage of their generation was inevitable. But we have to carry on this work. We have to figure out, if we just have a small piece of work to do on this planet while we're here, that's enough. We need a whole bunch of people doing small things, changing perspectives, taking a look at different things from a different lens, possibly. But the orca are my family. The orca, the Southern residents, like I said, have been one with me and my family for generation after generation after generation. They know love more than you and I will ever know love. They don't ever separate. They stay together forever. They mourn deeply, as you saw the mother carry her dead child for 17 days. It's a deep, deep community love. And that's who they are. And not only do we owe it to them to try to right some of the wrongs of yesterday that have led them to this suffering from this catastrophic disruption to the climate, to their world, to the ocean, to the rivers, to the salmon. But we owe it to ourselves and to our future generations. We have to leave this place at least equal to or better than when we received it while walking on this earth. And lastly, for me, Cecila means our grandmother, and the ultimate giver of life for me, and the way we're brought up, is our mother. There's nothing we wouldn't do for our mothers. And Earth is the ultimate grandmother, the ultimate giver of life for all of us, no matter where we're from. That is the giver of life that we have to protect. We have to recognize with common sense, not just science, that there's a cancer, and we can heal that. And it's up to us. So I'm going to leave a few minutes, if there's still a few minutes available, for questions. And I'm honored and privileged and thankful to be here today with you. And I'm thankful you're organizing such a summit that is important for the future, and it is our hope. You are our hope. Thank you.
Okay, so we were wondering if anyone could ask you questions if they had any.
Absolutely.
Jay, thank you so much for speaking on this. It's very powerful. Thank you. Leah is
So feel free to stay if you want to listen to the rest of our presentation, or we understand if you have to leave to do other things. But now we're going to go in breakout rooms into 4 groups, and where you have some questions, we're going to put in the chat and we're going to discuss together. And then hopefully after we have small group discussions, we can kind of share our most, what we felt was our most important answer together.
I have actually for you before you go. Sorry, everyone. They are doing breakout rooms. Can you hear me okay? I was breaking up earlier. No,
Sorry, you're kind of breaking up.
I'll type it in the chat.
Hi, Scott Jay.
That's what I wanted to say. Hi, Shka Jay. Thank you. And Jay, is there any way we can use the treaty rights to work with the tribes to bring back the salmon and the orcas and everything they depend on? That's one of my burning questions these days.
Okay, great. Jan, great to see you. Thank you. Haishka to you always. Thank you for your work. Amy had a question. What is the one message you would give to students who feel kind of hopeless with the environment? I would look around, you know, I'm going to pull up this this email and encourage you to take a look at this study that was done, because it really does give us some hope on some of the work going on around not only this country but the planet. And it's natural to feel despair, and our people have felt that and have gone through it. But right now we celebrate. We just had Indigenous Peoples Day, and we did a video. And one of the things I took from my elders is she is so hopeful, and she is big on celebrating survival. She's celebrating survival. And for me, I think we and you, all of you, there's a place where you can grab some courage. There's a place where others are doing the work, just average individuals. Myself, I'm just a fisherman. I'm not an educated individual. I'm just a fisherman, and my grandpa and grandma and great grandparents and other individuals instilled some courage in me by example, by doing things. But this, in the Grist, there's an article a few weeks ago, and it's a study. Indigenous resistance has staved off 25% of US and Canada's annual emissions. And I'm proud to be part of one of the battles here in Whatcom County to protect our treaty rights from the largest coal port in North America was proposed right here. And really, if there is hopelessness, you have a voice. And we need to use that with our legislators, with our parents, with our youth, with our and find that balance in marriage between science and common sense, science and your climate anxiety that you feel for your future. Because we, you know, and we have to be bold with that voice. We have to be willing to share that, because one of our oldest teachings is you can't leave anything on the table. If you have something to say, you have to say it. Otherwise, it'll haunt you. Otherwise, it'll hurt your sleep. It'll affect you. We have to speak. We have to speak and share those thoughts, and also solutions, common sense solutions. Jan, thank you for the question. Here's the treaties, as you know, have been successful, and it's unfortunate that we have to put our treaties on the line to stop things that don't make sense from taking place for these future generations, for the salmon, the orca, for our health. But really quick, I'll leave you with this. Corky, Leah, Amy, Jan, everyone here, these treaties are not Indian treaties. They're not just an Indian thing. They're under Article 6 of the United States Constitution. It's a supreme law of the land. But my great-great-great-great-grandfather came together with your fathers, and an immigrant sovereign and a true sovereign came together and entered into a treaty. If there's a violation on your end of the treaty and the bargain, the real estate contract, or on my end, no matter what, we should all be in an uproar and say, this isn't acceptable. This is dishonorable. That this violates our agreement that we entered into together. These aren't just Indian things. They're yours too. They're just as much yours as they're ours, but there's kind of a perception that they're just Indian treaties, but they're yours. Any other questions?
Thank you. That's so insightful, because I feel we're not upholding our end of the bargain big time. The non-tribal people, especially in the San Juan Islands, the powers that be don't enforce any protective regulations, and it's so upsetting. So we have to try and find new tools to protect the salmon and the orca and the forage fish and everything they depend on, starting with the plankton.
Yeah. Kathy Eberhardt asked, what are some things we can do in our everyday life that would help? One of the things, I had breakfast yesterday with an individual who is one of the most humble individuals that I've ever met in my life. He's being inducted into the Hall of Fame today at UW, and is a dear friend. But one of the things we talked about is why are things so politicized, especially the common sense? And I think that's one of the things I make an effort to do. Is this isn't red, this isn't blue. Let's not politicize our future generations' future and health. And I don't have social media, but I think for those that do, if we can really put out messages about this isn't, my position on this isn't red or blue. I have climate anxiety for my future. And I'm not going to point the finger at our past leaders and point blame and blame storm, but we have to acknowledge what yesterday once was here and look at the time frames that got us for me, it's 16 and a half decades since we signed the treaty, not 166 years. Let's look at it decade at a time. 16 decades. I've been here 25% of that time, and I'm only 46. But catastrophic disruption has taken place all over: rivers, orcas, salmon. I mean, it's everywhere. Land. So we need to depoliticize, don't make it political position, and we need to kind of stress that to our friends who are red or blue, who politicize things, and say, hey, no, this is our future. Climate anxiety is real for us, and we're concerned. What can we do about this?
Thank you so much for talking about all of that. And I think now we're going to go into our breakout rooms. So if you want to stay and listen in on one of the groups, feel free to, or if you have somewhere to go, that's feel free to do that too. So we're going to go into each group and we're going to copy and paste questions in. So we'll answer them together. And if you have something you really want to share, we will also share it together as a main group. And then I know since sometimes it's hard to sit for a while, we're going to be taking a brief intermission after we're done with our breakouts. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main room. So we're going to have a short intermission, but first we're going to have the student leaders share about what they thought was the most meaningful. So maybe if Kaya wants to share first.
Yeah, we had a great conversation in our group, just talking about some first encounters the group members had with the orcas and just some pretty powerful stories and personal connections. Just realizing that, it's important to pass on the torch of environmental stewardship from generation to generation. And now it's time for our generation to take up that torch again.
I'll go next for our group. The stuff that really resonated with me the most was all of us kind of have like the anxiety of it all. So we all talked about how like for us it's better to like get it over and done with, so then the anxiety goes away so we can like continue acting on it. So yeah, that was important. Taylor?
So in our group, we kind of just talked about how we wanted the future generations to see what the environment is, and we want to protect it, like how the environment has been protecting us and has been providing for us. And we need to do the same back for the environment. And then of course, we want to have our future generations see this beautiful environment that we currently have now. And then also for Jay's talk, they were in how the treaties us, and then we need to, keep with the treaties and not break away from them.
So my group, we kind of talked about a similar thing about the kind of the importance of the future generations, and then how our awareness has changed from like previous generations all the way up to our current one. And then I believe now that we're doing a short intermission, I think it's about 5 minutes. So if people just want to take a short break and walk around and stand up, and we'll come back for a couple more presentations afterwards.
And sorry that I went to a dead zone, a cell.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick sound test for my presentation here. So if you can hear it, please tell me, because I don't know if it works properly.
You're
so,
good.
I hear you 5 by 5.
Oh no, I'm going to be playing this and then. Can you guys hear the whale calls that are playing, or does it only play for me?
I can hear it. I can hear the whale calls.
Okay, so that's good. That's all that I needed to test. Okay, so that's going to be the end of our 5-minute break here. So I am up next to present, and I'll be talking about the Southern Resident Killer Whales. Okay. Hello, my name is Taylor Redmond, and I'm here to teach you guys about the Southern Resident Killer Whales of the Salish Sea. And then here are the Southern residents. Looking at the basics of killer whales. Okay, here we go. Looking into the basics of killer whales, what is an orca? So killer whales, scientifically known as Orcinus orca, are actually the largest species of dolphin, and they are part of the order of Cetacea, in which all whales, dolphins, and porpoises do fall under. And then under Cetacea, they do fall under the category of odontocetes, which means toothed whales. And then when we look at the Salish Sea, when we look at the Salish Sea, there are 3 ecotypes of killer whales that can normally be found here. We start off with the offshore killer whales, and these guys are extremely uncommon. We basically never see them in inland waters. And they are normally found outside on the outer coast, and they normally eat sharks, such as Pacific sleeper sharks. We have the bigs or transient killer whales, and then in recent years, they have become more and more common within the Sailor Sea, and they are marine mammal eaters, which means that they may mostly eat seals, sea lions, harbor porpoise, things like that. And then if you look at the big killer whales off the west coast on the outer coast, such as the California big killer whale population, you can commonly see them preying on things like gray whale calves. And then, of course, we have the beloved residents, and they are fish-eating orcas, and their diet mostly consists of salmon, specifically Chinook salmon. And then when it comes to identification of these individuals within this population, basic ID techniques will look at the orca's saddle patch, dorsal fin, and eye patch to identify an orca. So here in the left, we can look at L103 lapis. And then I did diagram out where her eye patch, dorsal fin, and saddle patch are. So that dorsal fin and saddle patch are going to be the normal areas that we would use to identify an individual. And then through IDing, orcas can be known on a very individual level. And then we can also recognize eye patches, of course, although it is harder because they don't have as many distinguishable features in comparison to dorsal fins. So here on the right, we have T46B1A Sakani and T86A4 Akia. And then the general rule is with orcas, white on black, you can use it to ID. So then going a little more into identification, here we have two individuals. And then looking at these two individuals, the left side being J38 Cookie and the right side being J47 Notch, there are many differences that distinguish them as individuals. For example, both of them have finger patches, which is that little, so the gray patch is their saddle patch, and then that little split that's kind of pointy at the end, that's a finger. So J38 Cookie's finger patch or finger saddle patch is a little small finger at the corner. Whereas if we were to look at Notch, it's more open and there's a little bit of black space in that. And then of course, we can also see the size difference in between them. J38 Cookie was born in 2003, and then J47 Notch was born in 2010. So again, that 7-year size difference in between the two males. And then looking at the critically endangered southern residents specifically. So of course, the southern residents are an endangered population of orcas that mainly travel throughout the Sailor Sea. But in recent years, they have kind of left this area and have been traveling elsewhere along the West Coast. So they consist of 3 pods, J, K, and L pod. Looking at their range can be seen from Southeast Alaska to around mid-California. Records of the southern residents towards the end of their range would include L pod showing up in Alaska in 2007, and then most of L pod showing up in Monterey, California at the end of March in 2019. And then we can also look at their call types, and then each call made by the southern residents can be identified into a group. Some of the calls seem to be favored by each pod. So with J pod, we have an S1 call type. It might be quiet, but if you can hear it, that's what it sounds like. And then K pod is known for sounding like kittens. It's like their little, K pod is the kittens, and then L pod is the birds. And then with that, so J pod likes to use the S1 call type, K pod likes to use the S16 call type, and L pod tends to use the S19 call type. And then on the left side here, we have a little diagrams basically saying what each pod sounds like, or what each specific call can be like equated to in like word form, I guess. Okay, then with the southern residents, here we go. So looking at the most recent births within each of the 3 pods, J pod had their most recent baby in 2020. September 25th, 2020, J58, a female, was born. Her nickname is Crescent. And one of the really unique things about J58's birth is that it was actually witnessed by a whale watching vessel that came across her on accident. So that, I mean, that really is helpful to research and things like that. So it's really cool about J58's birth. And then if we look at L-Pod, L125 element, who is also a female, was first seen in late February or in February of 2021 or earlier this year. And due to her size, when they first sighted her, she was probably born late 2020 or beginning of 2021. And then looking at K-Pod, they haven't actually had a successful birth since 2011, which is extremely concerning. This is a 10-year gap since their last successful calf. We know of pregnancies within K-Pod, such as K27 Deadhead, who was seen carrying a deceased neonate in 2016. And then she was again seen heavily pregnant in her third trimester in 2019, but nothing actually came of that. And we never saw her with a new calf. And looking at demographics of the Southern residents, J-Pod consists of 24 members. They currently have 11 adult females, 2 of which are thought to be post-reproductive, which means they have gone through menopause. And then orcas are generally thought to go through menopause in their early 40s, but there do seems to be exceptions, as one of the whales who was thought to be post-reproductive, which is J19 Shachi, who was born in 1979, is currently pregnant and in her late stages of pregnancy, which when the news came out, I was very confused because I was already under the assumption that she had already gone through menopause, but apparently not. And then J-Pod also has 3 young females, 4 adult males, and 6 young males. And then looking at K-Pod, they currently have 7 adult females, 2 of which are thought to be post-reproductive, 1 young female, 6 adult males, and 2 young males, and then for a total of 16 members within K-Pod. And then L-Pod is by far the largest of the 3 pods with a total of 33 members, 14 adult females, 4 of which are post-reproductive, 3 young females, 7 adult males, 8 young males, and then 1 of unknown gender, which would be L124. And then together, all of these numbers would add up to a total of 73 individuals within this population. So looking at the history of the Southern residents were actually never really that large of a population, but starting in the 1960s with the capture era and the capture operations going on in Washington State and Canada, it ended up taking approximately 46 individuals either into captivity or they were killed during the process of capture, and then from their families, leaving around 70 orcas left by the end of the capture era. And then a little fun fact, kind of, well, not so fun fact, but the original Shamu actually did come from J-Pod, one of our local pods here. And then during her capture, one of the orcas traveling with her did actually die to a tranquilizer overdose. And then the other orca that was traveling with her died from multiple harpoon wounds, which is, again, just this evidence of really horrific captures within Washington State. And then Shamu died almost 6 years after her capture. And then by the beginning of 1980, only 6 of those 46 that were involved in the capture process were still alive. And then 11 of those drowned. 11 of those 46 did drown during captures. As of now, 2021, only 1 Southern resident remains in captivity. Her show name is Lolita, but her real name is Tokate. Again, history of Southern residents. The population of the Southern residents would fluctuate over time, but they would make their peak in 1995 with 98 individuals. So they never really got above that 100 mark, but they would make a steep decline. From the end of 2014 into the beginning of 2016, there was a brief quote unquote baby boom. And then this event did lead to hope that the Southern residents may have had a fighting chance with the addition of around 10 orcas. And then of the 10 born, only 8 of them were named due to 1 stillbirth and then J55 disappearing within a week of his birth. But looking at now, I believe it's 5 of those 10 orcas born are still surviving. So J50 Scarlet did pass away, and then so did J52 Sonic and J54 Dipper. And then looking at the challenges to the Southern resident killer whales. So one of the really big concerns is with the toxin levels, not only in the Salish Sea, but just in the food that they're eating. There are so many pollutants in the Salish Sea that get into the aquatic food web, two of the main ones being PCBs and then DDTs. A big problem with this is that when the food is low, orcas have to dig into those fat storages, meaning that they are metabolizing these toxins that were originally just stored. So like for an example of this, if we look at the big killer whales, the mammal eating ones, they are higher up on the food chain. And so due to bioaccumulation, they are going to be more toxic than our southern residents. But the big killer whales are healthy, fat, and happy, which means that they don't have to dig into those fat storages, which means that they aren't going to have to metabolizing those toxins as the southern residents would have to during lean times. Let's go back to that. And then if we were to look at the pods themselves and where they travel, you can also see the effect of their travel patterns on their bioaccumulation of these toxins. If you look at J-pod, they are heavier in PCBs, which is a very prominent toxin in Washington State, and J-pod was known to stay in Washington State for longer than K and L-pod, for example. So in their previous years, they spent a lot of time in Washington State, also getting these toxins that are mostly seen in Washington State. Then if we were to look at L-pod, who is known to spend their time off the West Coast of around like Oregon, California areas, they are more polluted in DDTs, which is a very prominent toxin in California. So again, this connection back to where they are traveling is going to change what they are filled with toxin-wise. Of course, there are different forms of pollution, such as noise pollution. Noise pollution, which would result from things like cargo ships or container ships. And then the Salish Sea is completely filled with shipping lanes, like Harrow Strait, for example, off the west side of San Juan Island. Major shipping lane, but it also happens to be a major area where the southern residents tend to forage and find food. So with the Salish Sea being filled with shipping lanes, as a result, there's going to end up being a lot of underwater noise. And then looking at the gene pool for the southern residents and how that can cause problems. After the capture era, as mentioned before, in which dozens of southern residents were taken for captivity, it left the southern residents with an entire generation taken away. And with that entire generation being taken away, that would severely limit the gene pool for the southern residents. And then furthermore, if we were to look at genetic testing results, it would reveal that J1 ruffles and L41 mega site around 50% of the southern resident population. And then this would mean that there are also many males who are not able to contribute to genetic diversity within the southern resident population. So looking at bigger implications of this, it would lead you to believe that even with the number 73 that we have, not all members are reproductively successful, and that also means that not all members are contributing to population growth. And here on the right side, there is a depiction of the paternity within the southern residents. And then each color represents an individual male, with the lines coming off of them would be each of their offspring. And then the gray lines would represent the unidentified males from testing. And then, so if we were to look at this, you can see that brighter red color is going to be from J1. And then the dark blue color is going to be from L41. And you can really just see how many calves they sired and how much of their genetics is just throughout this entire population. Looking at the reproductive struggles within the southern residents, many of these factors put together can result in reproductive struggles. An example of this would be J31 Suchi, who is a southern resident, and then T37A Volker, who is a big killer whale. So in the beginning of 2016, J31 Suchi was seen pushing around a stillborn calf. But before that point, she had at least 4 aborted calves that we know of. And then even before her 2018 calf, which is J56 Tofino, she did have another aborted calf. And then if we compare that to T37A, who has had only successful births seemingly, or that we know of, since 2007, it is very concerning. And then again, looking into more reproductive struggles, there is of course going to be a dangerous side to pregnancies within the population. So J32 Rhapsody was found washed up dead in 2014, and the necropsy report of J32 showed that she was pregnant with a near full-term calf, and I believe it was female. The calf did end up dying for an unknown reason, and due to that, she became infected because she wasn't able to expel it properly, I believe. And so again, the Southern residents, we are constantly seeing them pregnant, but nothing happens. There are no new calves in the population. So we have population who is constantly being pregnant and constantly trying to have calves, but we never see any new calves. And then looking into killer whale society in general, matriarchs play a humongous role in the killer whale society. And that means the death of a matriarch is going to have major impact. So of course, in killer whale society, matriarchs are crucial to the survival of their families. And then within the Southern residents, these family ties are so much stronger than in other populations, such as the big killer whales. We are seeing these fully grown males stay with their mothers for their entire lives up until their death. So with that, when a matriarch dies, it's of course going to leave a huge impact to someone who is so tightly connected with them. So for example, with the death of L47 Marina, the Center for Whale Research released that it would increase the chance of death of her son, L115 Mystic, by 3 times. And then it would also increase the chance of her death for her grandsons, L110 Midnight and L122 Magic, by 6-fold. So of course, these matriarchs dying are going to impact especially the males within this population who have such a big reliance on not only their mothers, but their grandmothers. Okay, and then looking at the presence of the Southern residents in the Salish Sea in 2020, it has decreased drastically from a decade ago, especially in comparison to how the big killer whale presence or the mammal-eating killer whale presence is on the rise. On the left, you can see a comparison of sightings between the bigs, which is in orange, and then the residents, which is in blue. So their number of sightings have diverged dramatically, with the bigs presence being extremely prominent, especially in recent years. You can really see that change from 2016 on, where the big killer whales have just been here so much more often than the Southern residents. And then on the right, you can look at the presence of the Southern resident killer whales in August, and that was up to 2020. And then in 2020, it was 0 in comparison to a decade ago, which the low would be 20 out of 30 days. And then still with many of the years, such as like 2001 or 2009, having 30 out of 30 days in August with Southern residents, but we do not see that anymore. And then of course, the biggest factor for Southern resident survival is going to be food availability. Without salmon, specifically Chinook, they are not going to survive. Chinook is thought to make up around 50% of the Southern residents' diet during the fall, 70 to 80% in midwinter and early spring, and 100% during spring. And they still tend to heavily rely on Chinook during the summertime too. And most of the salmon that they are eating is Columbia River salmon. So of course, those dams being up in the Columbia River and how it affects the salmon population is going to directly affect the Southern residents. And one of the big problems with them relying so heavily on the Chinook, that Chinook are also endangered in many rivers. It is essentially an endangered species feeding on an endangered species. And on the West Coast, many salmon stocks are and have been decreasing and are being depleted. With their depletion, the Southern residents have gone elsewhere to find food. We are seeing this with how little of a presence they're making during their summer times, in which they used to spend like the entire summer off the west side of San Juan Island, but we aren't seeing that anymore. And then if we were to look at some Chinook stocks in crisis, that would include the Upper Columbia Spring Salmon Run, which is endangered. And then if we also look at the Lower Columbia River, Puget Sound, Snake River, Fall, Spring, and Summer Chinook salmon runs, all those are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And then if any of you guys want to learn more, there are many great organizations that you can do that with. So of course, here are some websites or organizations where you can learn more. So there's Orca Network, which is orcanetwork.org, Orca Behavior Institute, which is orcabehaviorinstitute.org, the Center for Whale Research, which is whaleresearch.com, Orca Sound, which is orcasound.net, and then Wild Orca, which is wildorca.org. And then any questions? Yes.
This is Janet. I was wondering, do the males breed outside their own pod?
Yes. So for like a little bit of an overview on the breeding process within the Southern residents, it's really the moms that are introducing their sons. So like one of the scenarios that I heard was like, it's J22 with her son, and then J22 introduces her son to other females. He's not doing that on his own. So of course, these females are going to be introducing them to other pods to maybe stop a little bit of inbreeding. So yeah, we do see a lot of, especially because L pod is thought to be more diverged from the rest of the pods. So both J1 and L41 were both from L pod. L1, or not L1. J1, of course, he has the designation of J, but he's actually an L pod whale because for whatever reason, he decided that he wanted to switch pods and confuse researchers. But so they're both from L pod, and they really have been spreading their genetics throughout the entire population. And we see a lot of interbreeding within each pod, because that is crucial to prevent inbreeding within them. Of course, this isn't foolproof because we have seen many cases of incest within the Southern residents, and it's extremely concerning when you are seeing mother and son have kids, specifically within the J16s. So.
Taylor, a little bit of a perspective on calf mortality. The milk of the mother is really very high in fat content, in the 20%, 22% range. And so when that calf is born, she is pulling out from fat stores. Unfortunately, the toxins are being pulled out for calories, are being put in the milk. And so these calves are getting a toxic brew of mother's milk right from day one. And so it's very difficult for them to physiologically survive that kind of imbalance and toxic load.
Yeah, and that's also why we see so much more toxins in the males, because the females can offload it through having children and feeding their children their milk. But the males, of course, can't have children, so they're going to be stuck with these toxins for their entire lives. So like firstborn males are going to be extremely toxic, because that's going to be the mother's toxin load up from when she was born to whenever she had her first calf. And if that first calf can't have any children to offload, that all those toxins are going to stay with him.
I have a question about, is it pronounced Tiluk? T46B1B?
Mm-hmm.
How do you say the name?
Tiluk.
Luke. I had somebody asking me about that whale, if he's been seen. I do recall last summer, people were kind of saying, oh, we saw him here or there. Have there been any sightings this summer?
The last time that he was sighted was in March, beginning of April this year. And I think a lot of us are really concerned about him right now, because he has not been seen with his sister or his mother for the past about 6 months. So this photo was taken very beginning of April this year, and this was like one of the very last times that he was seen. And from what I have heard and just speculation, he probably suffered from either leucism, which wouldn't really affect him health-wise, or Chediak Higashi syndrome, which actually would end up killing him at a young age. So if he did suffer from Chediak Higashi syndrome, he likely is dead at this point. So his mother, who is pictured in this photo to the left of him, and then he also has an older sister. Both of them have been seen multiple times without him. Yeah. And with him being such a young age, because I believe he was just born in 2018.
I was going to ask his age, so about 32.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, especially with his genetic condition, I don't see him being alive. I really hope he is, because he's such a cool whale.
Yeah. To Luke. Thank you.
Yes, Sylvia.
I was wondering if there were occurrences of like interbreeding between transients and southern residents.
Okay, so with them, they can't communicate. They have like completely different dialects and they diverged from each other like tens of thousands of years ago. So they can't even communicate if they wanted. And then also the southern residents tend to be extremely aggressive towards the big killer whales. I believe it was just a few months ago, there was an encounter where it was the Biggs matriline, I believe it was the T65As and T65B families. They were actually being chased by southern residents and they actually left and were like porpoising and going at a very quick speed for like a mile just to get away from the southern residents. And then there's also a case, I don't know how long ago, it was like a few decades ago, whereas J-Pod tried to chase some transient killer whales up onto the rocks, up onto shore. So they do not like each other. I like to say that they're in a turf war and they do not want to interact with each other. They just stay away. Possibility wise, in captivity, they have bred just through artificial insemination, but in the wild, they would never want to breed. So.
Are the artificially inseminated ones that are crosses between the southern residents and the transients, are they fertile?
I believe they are fertile. So technically they can have children, but I believe it was one of the killer whales who was in Loro Parque, which is in Spain, I believe, is like 4% southern resident. And like, I don't know. It's an entire ordeal, but so they technically can interbreed. They will probably likely be able to have kids. It's just in the wild, it's more of a matter of not wanting to have kids with like your turf war enemy.
Yeah, it's a cultural, social thing.
Yes.
Rather than a biological barrier, maybe.
Does anybody have an update on the lawsuit that was brought by a couple of the Lummi elders? I think we lost Jay. I was going to ask him if there's an update on that lawsuit to get Scully Tektonot or Tokite out of Miamis Aquarium. I haven't heard any updates on that lately.
I haven't heard any either, but I would probably check Orca Network because they normally are pretty close to that case. Yeah. I'd have to look into it though, but I really hope there's progress.
Oh my gosh. Well, they had taken kind of a different angle. It was something about the Tribal Antiquities Act or something where anything that had belonged to the tribes has to be returned to the tribes, and their angle was that she is part of their family, so they have every right to get her back. Yeah.
And then I believe there was a switch of ownership over Miamis Aquarium. So with that, there should hopefully be an inspection of the facility. And the facility is extremely illegal. So if there is an inspection, they will hopefully figure out finally that, hey, this tank is not legal. She should not be here right now. So we kind of just have to wait and hope that they will actually take action. And Miamis Aquarium actually will have repercussions for putting her in that tiny tank.
Yeah, you do kind of wonder what those laws are in place to do when they're not enforced. And I mean, it's not a big secret that, her tank has been illegal probably since the very beginning, but they continue to allow it to happen. It's kind of appalling. Really.
Yes. I mean, even with how Miamis Aquarium is dealing with it, I believe it was after Lolita's or Tokite's tank mate Hugo died, they actually wanted to get a replacement whale. And it was right after Keiko was released. And when he was kind of just swimming about and he didn't really have a direction, but Miamis Aquarium actually put out like a permit, like, hey, can we recapture Keiko and then put him in our tank? And it's like, this is a fully grown male that you want to put in this tank. And of course, I believe it was turned down, but that was like decades ago, but I don't know. I'm just really questionable of their management currently. So.
Thank you for the presentation on the orcas. And then now we're going to have Kaya Olson. She's going to be talking kind of about another similar factor that's impacting the orcas. So I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, so I'm going to be speaking. Sorry, let me get my screen share up. I'm going to be speaking about the lower Snake River dams. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes, we see it.
Along with my cat.
So, yes, in southeastern Washington on the Snake River, part of the Columbia River Basin, related to what Taylor was saying, you know, as a lot of the salmon at the orca salmon, the Snake River is a tributary of the Columbia. The 4 dams, Ice Harbor, Lower Monumental, Little Goose, and Lower Granite, were all built in the 60s and 70s for hydropower, irrigation, transportation, and recreational purposes. The problems, the dams have a lot of problems. Most significantly, salmon and steelhead mortality. An incredible 6.4 billion has been poured into a recovery attempt since 1980. But as you can see by this graph, they've been very unsuccessful. The populations have been falling. There have been brief upturns, but here in 2020, we can see that the population is at an almost all-time low. And these failing populations have repercussions throughout the ecosystem, everything from the nitrogen in the forest inland to the diet of the southern resident orcas. The populations are also treaty violations, as Jay mentioned earlier. You know, the treaties between the United States and the indigenous nations is not just an indigenous treaty. It's something we all have responsibility for. And right now, those treaties are not being met because of the failing salmon populations. And the dams themselves are economically not viable. The cost of renewable power, such as solar and wind, is actually undercutting the cost of hydropower. So consumers are paying more for power produced by the dams than they would be for power produced by the solar panels and wind turbines. Salmon recovery is so important for multiple reasons. Most clearly, the environment. Salmon are a keystone species of the Pacific Northwest, meaning that the entire ecosystem depends on their health. And as salmon are endangered species, that ecosystem is really at risk right now. And as Taylor talked about, the orcas are literally starving. They are an endangered species relying on an endangered species for food. The numbers really aren't adding up. Yeah. And also the social justice issue, the treaty rights violations. The indigenous nations have lived in partnership with the salmon and the orca for thousands of years, and it's not constitutional, really, that the salmon populations are this low and failing so much. Also, the economics of the issue. Restoring salmon populations would mean increased revenue for the Washington state for the entire recreational fishing. Related to that, recreation of the salmon themselves, the fishing, also recreation on the rivers would be a large source of income for the government, which could then be put back into projects such as river restoration. The solutions seem straightforward, but implementation is often the biggest barrier. Ideally, we would implement bipartisan dam removal policies and replace the current hydropower dams with alternative infrastructure, which cheaper renewable energy. Already, we've got some wind turbines down in the area of the dams, which are generating some great power. And we would also remove subsidies on agricultural transportation by barge, and instead invest in shipping by rail and road. We have to align our moral beliefs with financial incentives for doing the right thing. We have to make it easy and cheap to be on the side of the salmon and the orca, essentially. And also we need to restore the rivers. We need to take down the dams, and as was done on the Elwha dam removal project, we need to mitigate sediment, restore the habitat so the salmon can be living in an ideal environment. I would highly recommend, if you're at all interested or you'd like to learn more, just really educate yourself and others on it. Dr. Giles, she will be a guest speaker at next week's summit, so definitely stick around for that. Some websites that I would recommend checking out are the Snake River Savers, Wild Orca, and Dam Truth. And if you're involved in Instagram, some great action centers to follow are the Youth Salmon Protectors and the Snake River Savers. So the second part of this is we're going to be writing a email letter campaign to our congressional leaders. So we see here some Boise students mailing postcards, even during the pandemic, masks and everything. But letter campaigns are a great way to make congressional leaders aware of public concerns. For those of us who can vote, policymakers listen to their constituents because they depend on us for re-election. And for those of us who can't vote, it can be really frustrating sometimes. But it's this letter writing as a way for us to be politically active and make our voices heard without having a vote. So our targets for today are congressional leaders, so our senators and representatives in the Capitol, and our state governors as well. So for writing your own letter, we can, when we go into breakout rooms, we can always paste this into the chat, but there will be an auto-generated pre-loaded response, but if you want to add your own info onto there, and I'll tweak it a little bit. Here's some tips and talking points, credits, and any questions. Oh, before I say any questions, Betsy, I really appreciated using your photos on some of my slides. So thank you for your great work. But yeah, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, Kaya. Isn't it true that the dams increase the temperature of the water substantially in the impounded section of that dam, and that is detrimental to the fish as well?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. So on this infographic here from the Dam Truth website, you can see here that the reservoirs, they essentially create lakes. The Snake River at this point is not much of a river, it's more just a really stretched out lake. The reservoirs basically create an area that the water can heat up. It can raise the water temperature above the threshold that the salmon can tolerate. So it can literally heat the salmon up to death, especially the young salmon.
And also there are these toxic blue-green algae that can bloom and kill anything pretty much. Down in the Klamath River Basin, they've been having a lot of dogs, pet dogs die just because they went swimming behind the dams.
Huh.
It's horrible for everybody.
Definitely. I think that reiterates how, what's a health issue for the environment and for, these animals such as the orca and the salmon are also a health issue for us and for other animals close to us as well.
Kaya, do you have any, or do you know of any data that would compare the amount of electricity or power generated by the dams versus the wind turbines and or solar collectors in that same area?
I was looking for one of the graphs showing that this morning. I haven't found one, but I think it would be quite striking if you were to look at it side by side. One of the things they talk about in the film Dam to Extinction is that a common argument against taking the dams down is that they provide a significant amount of power. This is false information. The dams actually produce not as much power as solar and wind has the capability of, and it's also excess power, so it is not actually used by consumers on the grid. So one thing that the speakers in the film say is if we were to take the dams out tomorrow, there wouldn't be no blackouts, no power outages. The dams are really, it's hard to find a logical reason why they're still there after 50 or 60 years since being built.
One of the things that confuses me is this argument about transportation of grain products and so forth. Can you flesh that out for me a little bit more about what argument for keepers of the dams have about that, and what counter arguments would we have?
The common argument that it's too expensive to ship agricultural products by they are barge, the barge locks on the dams.
Network bandwidth is low.
Excuse me, Kaya, we're getting a message that says your bandwidth power or something is low, so you're sort of becoming a little bit intermittent.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so hopefully you can hear me now, hopefully. But yeah, so currently it is expensive, more expensive for farmers to ship their agricultural products, specifically grain, by rail than it is by barge. But that's because the government is subsidizing barge transportation. So if that subsidy was removed and the financial incentives lined up with non-dam related transportation, it would be more economically viable, as well as the right thing to ship by rail or by road for farmers. So I think it's easy to say, we should ship by rail, but for farmers trying to make a livelihood, there's not right now an economic gain of doing that. So I think a major step forward would be to remove the subsidy on shipping by barge.
Ironically, the barges and the trains are going down the same grade along the same river. It's just, you're right. Remove the subsidies. And that goes for a lot of things, such as coal and gas as well, and put those subsidies on renewables.
Janet, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not sure if you heard you.
Were you asking me?
Yeah, did you have something you wanted to add? It looked like you might say something.
Oh, I was looking for these postcards. I have a bunch of postcards with orcas on them. And I guess they're in my basement. We could use that as part of the letter writing campaign.
Actually, I have a large amount of postcards as well. I have about 150 sent to me by another youth environmental leader. So if anyone is interested, it was a little hard to figure out the logistics of doing that today, but you could definitely email me and I could try and get some to you, because I have quite a lot of postcards if you would like some.
Oh, great. This graphic is awesome.
Yes, I think it's, I can't pronounce her name. Hang on. It looks like Taylor Spark. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to butcher that. But
yeah, actually, I worked with Taylor. It's a Spaccarotelli. Her name before she got married was White. So, now it's Spaccarotelli, but she and I worked on this together, and she is just a fantastic artist. So
it's an amazing infographic, and I think it's so informative. I haven't found one that's quite this powerful in its imaging as well as its information. So yeah.
Good.
And it's just so beautiful, like the sort of watercolor effects out where the fish and the orcas are.
Just so that everybody knows, I mean, this is actually on our homepage at Damn Truth. And if you have utility for sharing this with other groups, school groups, or on postcards or in presentations, just there's a little form. It's called a use permission form, just so I can kind of keep track of who has it. But just ask for it, and we will send you a copy that could either be printed or used on social media or whatever. We want to get it out. We want it to help educate people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Oh, also on the Damn Truth page, they have connections with people who will distribute lawn signs that say, you know, take down the Snake River Dam. So if you're interested, definitely check out their website. It's very informative, and there's some cool stuff on there.
Let's see, where's my
yes,
Yeah, that's
there
it.
we go.
There you go.
I have one in my yard.
These are stickers, but we have yard signs as well, both.
Yes. Yeah, there are a bunch on orchids.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Betsy, out of curiosity, where do you live?
I'm in Redmond, Washington.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But we've got distributors for these yard signs kind of in 3 states. I think 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And there's a list of kind of local distributors or ones that are in different cities. If you're interested to get a sign, just go to our webpage and click on yard signs.
Are you aware of the Idaho legislator who is advocating removal of these dams?
Yes, Mike Simpson. It's a rep.
Could you say a little bit about that person?
Oh, well, I'm probably, gosh, I'm not the best person to present that, but he is a longtime Republican representative from Idaho, and he just kind of got to a point about 2 or 3 years ago and he said, I am not going to allow fish to go extinct on my watch. We love salmon in Idaho, and we just have to do something. So he has made a proposal for, I don't know, don't quote me on this. I think it's $33 billion proposal. It's a very rough cut about what needs to happen, but basically he is proposing to breach the dams specifically, but to make those people who would have negative impacts, to make them whole in the process of this project that he's doing. And there was a short documentary film that was just released We have a 5-minute trailer, which I would say is kind of valuable on our Damn Truth website. Oh no, I don't have it up yet. You might just go to YouTube and type in Salmon Reckoning. Salmon Reckoning. It's a 26-minute documentary, which is probably not available yet, but the trailer is, and I think the trailer is good to watch. I'll be, they had it on PBS for PBS passport holders, but as soon as they released it in the Idaho public television, they had, well, wait a minute, maybe the second showing hasn't happened yet. Might be on Sunday. Well, you're probably not in Idaho. Anyway, there's going to be a little bit of difficulty trying to get a hold of that documentary, but eventually it'll come out. But I would recommend watching the trailer for sure. And it tells about Simpson. We also have a little, a short documentary about that Simpson produced about his plan early on. And I think it's on Damn Truth's homepage. I think that's where we put that. Can't quite remember. Look. But it outlines his, I'm just looking here. It outlines his objectives pretty well.
So Betsy, I heard some of the trade-offs were that environmental protections would be lifted, like along the rivers and such.
Oh yeah,
I don't recall. One thing that I do recall that was kind of a big stickler for everyone was there were some part of his proposal was to not allow any further litigation, not just on the Lower Snake River dams, but all of the dams in the Columbia Snake Basin, which is, I don't know, Chris, can you help me here? Yeah, that was an issue with his plan. The other big issue that I'm recalling is that his proposal, which is not detailed, it's not a logistics or a strategic or a tactical implementation. It's poofy clouds at this point, ideas. But their thought was to reach the dams at the end of the 10-year time frame rather than at the beginning. So we had a reaction to that. You got to do that first. Yes, you do need to make people whole, but yeah, I'm just not the best informed person to talk about this, so I kind of refer to those documentaries.
Well, thank you for sharing, Betsy, about that. I did some research into Simpson's proposal. Interestingly enough, to breach the dams just outright, it would take 1.4 billion. Simpson's proposal is 34 billion. So there's a lot of compensation for various groups in there. So it is a fairly hefty sum compared to what breaching the dams would actually be. So, I mean, it's pretty great that there's a hardcore Idaho Republican who's advocating for the removal, but there are some downside or some catches. Like you mentioned, there's moratoriums or halts on like public comment for 10 years on like water quality issues. And so those are some kind of unsavory caveats to that. But yeah, so, and also the whole 10 years thing, I don't think we can wait until 2030 to remove the dams. We need a shorter timeline than that. Yeah.
The positive that I took from his activity is somebody is talking about it seriously and the conversations are moving. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's benefit in just having that, because before he stepped forward, it was kind of a taboo topic, even among our Democratic leadership in Washington State.
Absolutely. Even among, like you said, very very democratic or very liberal representatives, it's still was a topic tiptoed around. They didn't really want to lean one way or the other, but hopefully Simpson stepping up will encourage others to step up. And that's part of why I think this letter campaign is important.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Kaya, for your talk. I think going off the letter campaign, we're gonna move into short breakout rooms since we don't have quite so much time. So we're gonna just go over a couple questions and submit our letters.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Kaya. That was so wonderful.
Thank you, Janet. And thanks, Betsy, for interjecting on all that too.
Good job, too.
This is a wonderful event. Thank you all. So inspiring, everyone.
Yeah, you guys are doing a fantastic job. It's so impressive what you have learned. And the thing that's so great is that you're also able to articulate it really well. So yeah, good job.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. We hope to see you next weekend as well. We have Dr. Giles and I think it's Grace Ermy from the Allen Institute of Artificial Intelligence speaking. So I'm very intrigued to hear what they have to say. So we hope to see you guys then as well.
And I think if you go both times, we have a raffle prize, or a couple raffle prizes for attending both sessions.
I actually want to have less stuff. That's one of my life objectives. So I don't know if I want to have a raffle prize, but I could give it to someone else.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully my speaker's working. It's been terrible here in my house, so excuse the lack of video, but I hope you guys can help me in applauding our student leadership team for putting this together and leading it. They did an amazing job. And we look forward to next week with the really great speakers as well. So great job, Leah, Kaya, and Taylor and Rachel had to hop off. Thank you guys for coming and supporting these student leaders.
Ishka.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.